What's good, people? Welcome to another episode of Valid Talks. And as we know, it's Black History Month, so I decided to do a little research on some Black history. Today we're gonna be doing Frannie Lou Hamer. I don't know how many people know of her name, but we're gonna play the video and learn a little something new. So before I start, I want to say that this video is brought to you by Grunge. They are a channel dedicated to history, entertainment, science, and it's little tidbits, and it's plenty more. I'm just reading the little description, but yeah, this looks like a pretty cool channel. I just want y'all to check that out. This is where I got it from, and we're gonna begin the video. I never heard. First of all, let me just say this. I'll give you a little quick background to this. Respect to all our ancestors, to all the people that came before us. You know, as we know, it's Black History Month, but I think it's way more than a couple months. We need to really reflect and have a lot of respect for the people that came before us. When I listen to this woman's story, man, it makes me really appreciate everything that I have, you know what I mean? Because the people that came before us went through a lot for us to get to where we got to. So take some time, do a little research. Get just one person, two, as much as you want. You know, get to know some of the people that lived before us and what they had to do in the trials and tribulations and the temperament of the country. That's one of the things I want people to really understand, that the temperament of the country has never really shifted too much. It's always kind of been the same. It's just a little, always turmoil. So her name is Frannie Lou Hamer, and this is her story.
Police
brought to you by Grunge.
And even forced sterilization. She never stopped working for equal voting rights for all. This is the tragic real-life story of Frannie Lou Hamer. Born on October 6, 1917 in Montgomery County, Mississippi, Frannie Lou was the 20th and youngest child of Lou Ella and James Townsend. Both Lou Ella and James worked as sharecroppers their entire lives.
Wow. Did y'all catch that? She was born to, I have it written down here, 20th youngest child to sharecroppers. Now it makes me think, why would they have 20 kids? Why would they have so much kids being born into that type of lifestyle? I don't know, but maybe y'all can tell me why somebody would do that.
When Frannie Lou was just 6 years old, she joined them despite having endured a bout of polio just a year earlier. Hamer was 8 years old in 1925 when she saw Joe Pullum, a local sharecropper, lynched. In an interview with Jack Odell in 1960,
so she was 8 years old when she seen somebody killed. What does that even do to your mind? You know? What does that even do to your mind?
65, she said, "I remember that until this day, and I won't forget it."
Yeah.
Poverty forced Hamer to drop out of school at the age of 12. And by the age of 13, she was picking as much as 400 pounds of cotton in a day and receiving $1 for her work. Since Hamer had learned how to read and write during her brief time in school, she also worked as a record keeper on the plantation and soon discovered just how the owners would cook the books to cheat the poor sharecroppers out of their fair wages.
So basically, we've always been getting cheated since day one. You know, these minimum wages, everything that we got going on, it's been in place. It's always been meant for us to stay under the radar as far as finances go.
Offset this, Hamer began secretly tilting the scales to ensure people weren't cheating.
Wow.
She later recalled, "I didn't know what to do, and all I could do was rebel in the only way I could rebel." In 1944, Frannie Lou married.
This sister was a revolutionary. She was born in 1917. This is the early times, you know what I'm saying? And she's doing these things in the times where you can get killed and lynched. You know, she's putting her life on the line for this. And how many of us can say we're putting our life on the line for a better future? How many of us? You know, not too many of us today.
Harry Pat Hamer, a tractor driver on a local plantation. 17 years later, in 1961, she underwent surgery to remove a small cyst in her stomach. When she woke, she discovered that she'd also been given a hysterectomy without her consent. According to PBS, This type of forced sterilization was so common at the time that it became referred to as a Mississippi appendectomy, a term coined by Hamer herself.
Wow.
On June 8, 1964, Hamer testified before a panel in Washington, D.C. that at the North Sunflower County Hospital, 6 out of the 10 Negro women that go to the hospital are sterilized with the tubes tied. Forced sterilizations have a dark history and an equally dark present in the United States. Indiana passed the first forced sterilization law in 1907. And while they hit their peak in the 1930s and 1940s, targeting those deemed to be criminals or unfit by the 1950s, sterilization laws started targeting welfare recipients as well. Forced sterilizations were frequently racially motivated. This became abundantly clear when Mississippi proposed a bill that would make it a felony for a parent on welfare to have more than one child. Jill?
If y'all caught that, I hope y'all made the connection to modern times. I'm not gonna say nothing on it. For those who have that crazy brain power, for what that they just said, I'm gonna play it back. Connect it to modern times and just do research. Just connect what they just said to modern time and play it back.
This became abundantly clear when Mississippi proposed a bill that would make it a felony for a parent on welfare to have more than one child. Jail time could be avoided if the parent consented to sterilization. Ultimately, sterilization was removed from that bill, but untold women like Hamer still were sterilized without their consent. On August 31st, 1962, Hamer and 17 others went to the courthouse in Indianola, Mississippi to register to vote. According to PBS, most of the group was blocked from even attempting to register. Only Hamer and one other man were allowed to fill out an application and take a literacy test. At the time, literacy tests were purposefully designed to keep black people from voting. And when Hamer was asked to explain de facto laws, she later recalled that, "I know as much about a facto law as a horse knows about Christmas Day." After failing the literacy test, the group...
She had charisma and she had character. You know what I'm saying? And she's strong, man. That was a strong black woman right there. You heard that?
Was denied the right to register to vote. On the way home, their bus was stopped by police and fined $100 for being too yellow. Then the persecution got worse. The owner of the plantation where Hamer worked and lived demanded that she withdraw her application to vote.
Mr. Marlowe told me that I would have to go down and withdraw my registration or leave because they wasn't ready for that in Mississippi.
Hamer refused and was immediately thrown off the plantation where she had lived and worked for 18 years. She temporarily stayed with a friend before finding a new home, and just narrowly missed being murdered by those who were trying to suppress the black vote.
This is a woman.
They shot in the house 15 times, thinking that I was there.
On January 10th, 1963, Hamer was finally able to pass the literacy test. According to The Nation, after her second attempt on December 4th, she told the registrar, quote, "You'll see me every 30 days till I pass." A month later, she passed. But despite now being registered to vote, she discovered that she still wasn't allowed to vote because she didn't have any poll tax receipts. In some parts of the United States, people were required to pay tax in order to vote.
Always find a way, man.
To ensure that the poorest people, who were often people of color, didn't get a voice.
Remember in the Matrix they said, they are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys.
In the government. And they weren't subtle about this fact either. For instance, in 1939, Alabama's Tuscaloosa News published an editorial that read in part, "This newspaper believes in white supremacy, and it believes that the poll tax is one of the essentials for the preservation of white supremacy." In 1962, the United States passed the 24th Amendment, which outlawed poll taxes for federal elections. Despite this, Hamer was still denied the right to vote a year later because it wasn't really enforced until 1965. And to this day, 8 states, including Mississippi, still haven't ratified the amendment. While Pap worked to pay off their sharecropping debt at the plantation, Hamer continued working toward voter registration and desegregation. On June 9, 1963, Hamer and 9 other activists were returning on a bus from a voter registration and civic education training session in Charleston, South Carolina. The activists had tried to integrate lunch counters at the various bus stations along their way home, and their protest had enraged their bus driver. According to Frannie Lou Hamer, America's Freedom Fighting Woman by Megan Parker Brooks, the driver began using the phone at every stop, reporting their location to Mississippi police. In Winona, Mississippi, police arrested at least
It's called a informer.
6 of the activists, even those who'd remain on the bus, and took them to jail. Hamer and her fellow activists weren't released from jail until June 12th. And in those 3 days, Hamer sustained such severe and prolonged beatings that she suffered from lifelong damage to her kidneys, eyes, and legs. In addition to beating the activists themselves, police also forced the other black people who were also imprisoned in the jail at the time to beat the activists as well. While there was later a brief trial, the police were cleared for their actions.
Yo.
Despite failed attempts to work with the all-white pro-segregation Mississippi Democratic Party, Hamer co-founded the Mississippi
just
Freedom
one
Democratic
instance
Party.
what we know.
And in 1964, she went to the Democratic National Convention in an attempt to get representation. As a result, she received death threats. When she reported them to the police, they told her, quote, "Don't look to us for help." On August 22nd, 1964, Hamer
when she called the police, they said, "Don't look to us for help." This is a woman.
Testified before the Credentials Committee at the Democratic National Convention. She started by stating her full name and home address, defiantly signaling her fearlessness to every white supremacist. According to the Washington Post, President Johnson was terrified that her testimony at the convention would break up the coalition of white Southern delegates.
She shook the president up. Y'all hearing this, people? This one black woman shook the president up.
Who needed to get elected. He tried to convince her not to speak,